Good morning. My name is Jessica McCullum, and I am the mom that started Autism Moms of Kona. So I'm here sitting having coffee before I have to start the whole school routine, getting the kids ready for school, just like any normal mom out there. But this week is a special week for us because it is Autism Acceptance Week. And so I wanted to take the time to share a little bit of something with you all in regards to acceptance that a lot of moms don't experience with their children. But us moms, especially those that are raising a child with profound autism, do experience. So one of the things that I found when starting this group, Autism Moms of Kona, is that we experience grief, and it is important to go through processing that grief, and we can do it together. And so we get together, we call it tea time, and we have our cups of tea and we sit around in a circle and we share our stories and our grief, but we also share our wins with each other. It is okay to have grief. It took me so long as a human being and a mother to realize that it was okay to have those very human emotions. It was valid and it was real. Now, what grief am I talking about? So, it's difficult to accept your child for who they really are if you don't accept first yourself and what us Hawaiians call your kuleana, or your life's responsibility that was given to you for having your child. And so once you're able to accept all three things, yourself and your life's responsibility in your life and your child, then you truly find humility and you accept what life has blessed you with. And I call it a blessing because when you find humility and when you're humble about the fact that you have these very real and sometimes embarrassing and shameful emotions, then you're able to find true empathy for your child and for yourself and for others. And you can find compassion and hope. And lastly, joy through the process, because you can break through and really connect at the wins that you have with your children every single day, every single week, and every single month. So our support group happens monthly, but my hope is that we can do this on a daily basis. And I don't mean daily by thinking about all the grief that can arise, because everybody knows what it is. Everybody has it. You know, there's 7 stages of grief to talk about. And so you talk about the first stage, which is shock and denial. A lot of parents go through this because they're like, my child is not autistic. It cannot be. My child, why me? Nope. And that's just because it's out of fear, you know? The second stage of grief is pain and guilt. What did I do? Is it my fault? Is it my body? Is it my genetics? Is it something I did? Is it the Coca-Cola in 4 ounces that I drank when I was 3 months pregnant? Is it the fact that I gave them too much screen time when they were too young? Or I didn't give them enough lessons when they were 1 year old? That happens. And then the next stage of grief is anger and bargaining. Why me? Why my child? This cannot be happening, and you are very angry towards everybody trying to love you and support you in your life and understand. But anger and bargaining then makes way to depression, reflection, and loneliness. We don't need to talk about that. But after that point of loneliness and depression is the upward turn. You know, you start to realize all of the things that you've abandoned in your life that are beautiful, and you need to carry on and be the strongest person that you can be for your family. And so the upward turn then leads into reconstruction and working through all of that stuff. But it also means building an ideal lifestyle and accommodating your child. So here's where you dive into any sort of options and resources that you can utilize to help your child, whether it's changing their diet, whether it's being involved in the community and volunteering and embracing autism, whether it's biomedical healing, whether it's ABA therapy. There are just so many resources out there that are waiting for you to have some courage to reconstruct the way that you deserve to live your life. It can also be very small. You know, you can reconstruct the way that their room looks so there's less clutter. You can add cool LED lights that are blue and make them feel calm, and, you know, have some ambient sounds that help them to sleep better. And of course, the last step of grief is acceptance and hope. So, you know, I'm going to share a little bit about my process through these stages of grief, and just realize that you can revisit all of these stages at any point in your life, because life changes, especially when you raise your child. They get into that next stage of life, and you know, you might have to revisit some of these stages. Also, there is a thing called regression. And regression is when you have an autistic child and they make leaps and bounds and amazing progresses, but then they kind of fall back and are delayed again, and they have behavioral issues or a loss of ability. And I've noticed that at those points of regression, it is incredibly important to have the support around you to relive through these stages of grief, because the quicker you can work through these inevitable stages, then the quicker you can get back to reconstruction and acceptance, right? And so when I first found out that Ava was autistic, you know, shock and denial happened when I started realizing that she wasn't quite like the peers that she was playing with. And I was like, this can't be true. This can't be true. And I experienced grief because I carried this child. It was my first child, and I carried her in my womb for over 9 months. She did not want to leave. And so, you know, I started to dream about what it would be like to be a mother of this child, and to grow with my husband, and grow my family, and to raise this child. And what was she going to look like? And I dreamed about tea parties and teaching her how to climb trees and her first word and all of these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. So I think it's fair to say that when I visited grief in 3 arenas that you really need to give power and acceptance towards all 3 of these levels of grief. The first, again, is the grief for the child that you thought you were going to have, and also the grief of the child that you may have lost through the initial regression. The second is the grief of the individual and the life that you knew, because becoming a parent definitely comes with sacrifice, in the sense that you are no longer responsible for only yourself. You're responsible for your child. And you may realize along the way that there are parts of you that you have to deal with and accept so that you can be strong enough to raise your family with acceptance and joy. And lastly, there is the grief that you have to experience for the life that you thought you would live as a parent. And so that motherhood is something that you definitely have to reconstruct in your head with your partner and with your family and with anybody who brings you support in your life. It requires communication and solidarity. So let me go back to when I realized that I, was in shock and denial that Ava was not the same. I felt a lot of pain and guilt because I experienced a regression from her. She used to talk and say mama and dada and baba. She used to have eye contacts and all of these amazing things up until about 10 months old. And that all stopped, and she stopped making eye contact and trying to interact with me. She stopped talking and requesting things, and she just stopped learning at that point, for the most part, developing and hitting her normal milestones. And so essentially, I felt like I had lost the child, that happy, cheerful, bubbly child that was so eager to be a part of my world. And so I felt a lot of pain and guilt, like, is it something that I did with my parenting? Is it something that I did in my pregnancy? Did I not breastfeed long enough? Oh my goodness, there are all so many layers of mom guilt, but especially of mom guilt for a mom of an autistic child. And then comes the anger and defensiveness. Like, oh, it's everybody else's fault. It's dad's fault. It's grandma's fault. It's, I don't have enough support. So, that happened for a very brief amount of time. And then there was the longest period that I experienced was depression, reflection, and loneliness. Because this is where you isolate. This is where you stay at home and you fear social stigmas, and you fear being judged by even your family and your friends for how you're trying to cope with autism and how to raise them. You fear all of the suggestions that they throw at you, like, why don't you just change your diet? Or why don't you want to explore stem cell treatment, or whatever it might be? And it's because you're having difficulty working through these stages of grief. So you have to work through those first. And then again, there's the upward turn. This happened for me after I had Alex, and Ava was about 2.5 years old at the time. And I started fundraising, and I started earning money to get her an iPad so hopefully she could start talking. And, this was in 2016. And so, I definitely had a vigor for life. I made a probiotic at home to try to help her. I changed her diet. I got her exercise. I got her into multiple different resources at a fantastic integrated and inclusive school called Gordon McCaw STEAM Academy. And life was great and life was good. And, we were working through it. But then I did not get to the stage of acceptance because I was trying to make her into something she was not. And I didn't really realize that that was happening. I was trying to fix her. Um, and I didn't realize that was happening until she had another regression. And slowly, all those beautiful things that we were doing to help make life a little bit easier for her were still not good enough because she got older. She still couldn't potty train. She was smearing poop along the walls when she was 4 years old. And she was having meltdowns, and she could barely get in the car and get out of the car to go somewhere else without tearing all our heads off. And, there were all these things that just weren't changing, and she never really talked again. She says mom now, and I love that. But she still is learning to communicate through her iPad, but she is still nonverbal. And so that's when we went back to shock and denial. And I've been processing grief all over again. We moved back to Hawaii. I went through pain and guilt. I went through anger and bargaining. But I went through depression for years, and I isolated myself here in Kona. And I only had one or two friends that really understood. And I continued to try to just face it with loneliness. So, of course, that can have a difficult time on your marriage and your relationships with your family and your parents and so on and so forth. And so my upward turn, I'm happy to say, is now here. We brought back Autism Moms of Kona and infused so many more resources, not only for Ava, but for our community around us. And acceptance has happened for me, I believed, because I have identified that I needed to accept this for myself as a parent, as an individual. I needed to accept this for my life and my family and our calling to share our story. And I needed to accept this for Ava. And when I truly, truly stooped down to her level and learned from her, and tried to seek actively what brings her joy, I call this the Autistic Joy Project. My life was changed for the better, and I am so grateful and will never go back. So acceptance and hope is here for me, and I look forward to seeing, and I hope this video can inspire you to get the supports that you need, even if it's just a counselor. That's because every counselor out there is very well versed in these 7 stages of grief. So start there, and let's get to work. And let us celebrate autism this week. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I hope you have a wonderful day.